Craig Kelly, thank you so much for joining me. Now, the Prime Minister has said that children like Greta Thunberg, who think that the end of the world is coming, they'll be wiped out, should get a different perspective. But why isn't the government offering that different perspective with different facts that these children might not know?
Well, Andrew, I think the events that we've seen over the past week changed the game. We've had those protests here in the streets, children completely brainwashed, just saying what is the exact opposite of the truth. We've had reports of women having abortions, supposedly because of fears of climate change, women not having children. We saw that poor young Greta Thunberg, the distress that she was under there in the UN, all because of lies that are being peddled. Now, I think we've really got to take a hold of this as government, and we've got to get out there and get on the front foot and tell the truth, because the truth rebuts every single one of these alarmist lies that they carry on. Every single thing they tell you, from more fires to more deaths to polar bears drowning, when you look at the evidence and the peer-reviewed science, it tells the exact opposite of what's being peddled, in many cases, in the mainstream media.
I agree with you completely, but I don't want to go to some of these things that you and I would probably both agree. Well, let's do a little list for your colleagues. Those things you should be telling in order to give that other perspective. But just one more question on that front. Why is it that ministers, I mean, you're a terrific exception, right? But why are the ministers not giving the different perspective that the Prime Minister suggests children like Thunberg and others who are freaking about all this, why aren't they giving that different perspective that those children need? Like saying, for instance, you're less likely to die now of a climate-related disaster than you ever have been in the past 100 years.
Well, Andrew, that's the exact point that you make. In fact, if you look at the database, this is a UN-sponsored database that looks at all the deaths from extreme weather events going back to the 1920s and 1930s. And last year, 2018, was the lowest number that they've ever had. It was 6,420 deaths over the last 12 months for 2018. Now, if we put that in some context, if we look at what the rate of deaths were in the 1950s, which was still significantly down from the 1930s and the 1940s, if we just take that rate in the 1950s, last year we would have seen 750,000 people die from extreme weather events. The number is not 750,000, it's 6,400. So the number is down.
This is the point. I know, I agree with you exactly, and I'm going to run that graphic for a long time yet, because we need to counter these scares. But the point is, until government ministers, and particularly the Environment Minister, start countering the misinformation by good information instead of running and hiding all the time, you're not going to win that argument. True?
Look, you're 100% right, Andrew. And I think we can argue about what's been done in the past. We may have not been as on the front foot as we should have. But as I said, the events that we've seen over the past fortnight, there's a clear obligation to make sure as government we are out there and we are countering all these lies. Because they are just
There's just so much fear. There's so much fear from the global warming movement that they, you know, ministers just hide in their office rather than engage. And you're going to be run over if you don't actually stand and fight. Now, listen, let's go through the list of things that you and I would agree. They're uncontroversial, as in they're scientific and there's no debate about them. It's not like this scientist says this and that scientist says the other. This is scientific fact. A list of things that every minister should repeat to get rid of the scare. Now, we've mentioned there's never been a time where you're least likely to be killed by a climate-related catastrophe.
And it's,
how about this?
Just on that, it's 99% less than what it was for our grandparents and our great-grandparents. It's not just slightly down, it is down 99%. Now, that doesn't mean the climate has improved. What that means is it's our use of fossil fuels, of steel, concrete and aluminium that have made us so much safer from extreme weather.
Okay, all right. So that fact, I will add something slightly different to what you've just said. You said it's because we can survive the catastrophes better, but also, is it not true, unambiguously true, from the Bureau of Meteorology, from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the number of cyclones around the world and in Australia have fallen.
Look, the number in Australia has fallen significantly. And if you look at the data from around the world, we are at an anonymously low period of cyclone and hurricane activity. Again,
so why don't politicians, your ministers say this? Okay, I'll give you another one, and then you tell me your favourite. The Pacific Islands, low-lying Pacific Islands, those atoll islands, places like Vanuatu and Tuvalu, are not drowning under rising seas. Most are, in fact, increasing in size. Tuvalu by nearly 3%. True or false?
Exactly true. And this is not just something that's made up. This is what the peer-reviewed science says. And not just one published paper. There's at least half a dozen published papers that confirm that fact. And yet we had the UN Secretary-General, the Portuguese socialist Guterres, out there parading around doing these photographs with, water up to his waist, telling complete and utter lies about these Pacific Islands drowning. And you look over the other side.
Look, we're getting curry from the Pacific Island nations about, oh, what are you doing? The Fijian Prime Minister, or what is he, a dictator, whatever he is now, saying, oh, terrible Australia, all those island nations are ganging up on us. They're not drowning. And I can't understand why journalists don't call them out. All right, I've mentioned my couple of facts that I think every minister should be armed with and should be repeating. Give me another one.
I think the global wildfires. We've heard this thing, and remember the climate alarmists, they love the fire and brimstone stuff, that the world's on fire. And if you look at the pictures and the pamphlets and the posters that the kids were holding up at the protests last week, it was all about the world's on fire. The peer-reviewed science is clear on this. It says wildfires are down 25% over the last 2 decades. And that applies in Australia as well. The global area being burnt is declining, and declining substantially. There are not more wildfires, there are less. And if you go back to periods of the 30s and the 40s and back in the 1800s, much, much larger areas of Australia were affected by wildfires than there are today.
Okay, well, I'll give you another one then and see if you can trump this one. According to NASA, again, peer-reviewed, it's 100% true, you can take it to the bank. The world is greening.
That's right.
The world is actually getting greener, not more blasted and desertified. It's getting greener. 5% of the green area has increased over the last 2 decades. Give me one to trump that one.
It's actually afforestation is greater than deforestation. And there was a peer-reviewed study out, I think, about a year ago that showed the increase in forests is actually the size of New South Wales, Victoria and South Australia combined. That's the increase.
Why doesn't your agriculture minister say that? This is the thing, that the ministers are silent. Give me another one to match
You could look at global crop yields. Pick whatever crop that you would like. And we have seen over the last 40 to 50 years absolutely remarkable increases in crop yields. Whether you pick rice, or you pick wheat, or you pick barley, or you pick cocoa, no matter what you pick, there's been these remarkable increases. And again, you listen to these alarmists and all the crop yields are shrivelling up and everyone's starving.
Oh, it's true. The IPCC and others were, and I heard it on the ABC, said many times over the years that we face food shortages as a result of monsoonal failures and all that related to climate change. I'll give you another one. The polar bear, which the Coca-Cola company put on their cans a few years ago as a symbol of, a species that was threatened by climate change. Polar bear numbers have increased, not fallen, increased. This is uncontroversial science. Have you got another one for us?
Well, I could give you another one if we have a look at some of the sea level rises over in the Maldives. Now, remember, the Maldives was actually meant to be underwater by now, and its population was meant to all be refugees. Since that prediction was made, the population of the Maldives has doubled, and there are hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars pouring into the Maldives to build these luxury resorts right on the waterline.
But look, I just don't understand it. The ministers that we have, like the agriculture minister, he should be saying, By the way, did you know that rainfall in Australia over the past century has not fallen? If anything, has probably increased. Why does he say that? I mean, I don't get this, you know. And why doesn't the health minister say, you know, Greg Hunt, lovely guy, but why doesn't he come out publicly and say, by the way, did you know you are far more likely to die of cold than you are of heat? Therefore, you should fear a cooling Earth more than you should fear a warming one.
It's 20 times, Andrew. The peer-reviewed science says you are 20 times more likely to die from cold weather than hot weather. The study in Australia has that number about 6.5 times. And again, we've got this, one of the AMA, some of these medical groups out there, in violation of the Hippocratic Oath, basically pushing policies that they don't know what they're talking about, that will push up the cost of electricity and actually cause more harm to people.
Yes, because people will die of cold in their own homes. We've seen some of that phenomenon already in Britain, and pensioners here have told university studies that they are too scared to heat their homes in winter because they can't afford it. Craig Kelly, I'm going to do a little list on my blog of those things that every minister in your government should know and should repeat if the government really is serious about giving these kids who think the end of the world is nigh a different perspective. Let the government start arguing it. Craig Kelly, you've done a monster job for so long on this issue. You've been alone in this. I think you've been heroic, and thank you so much indeed for your time.
Thanks, Andrew. We owe it to our kids to get the truth to them.
I think we do indeed. Craig Kelly, thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.